Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's evening show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. And we're broadcasting throughout the United Kingdom and around the world on all our digital platforms, bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on TikTok simultaneously. Folks, we've got a great show lined up. Very excited about our guest who's coming up at 7:30. The one and only Thomas Mace Archer Mills, the chairman of the British Monarchist League. And we've got a lot to chat with him about. That's at the bottom of the hour at 7:30, and we'll be speaking to Thomas for 20 minutes or so. And Thomas is a great chap and a very knowledgeable royal correspondent and historian. And he was at the state opening of Parliament and he was interviewed by several media outlets yesterday, and we'll be talking to him about that and about his thoughts on the matter as well. And we might have a few comments about ourselves about the state opening as well. We're going to be doing some activism this weekend in Glasgow, and we're looking for people to join with us. So if you're interested in being an activist with A Force for Good this weekend, this Saturday, now please do send a message to contact at A Force for Good, because we need a team to do the activism this Saturday, okay? And we're looking for a few good men and women to stand with us. Okay, so that's A Force for Good's going to be out this Saturday. We're going to be celebrating the Platinum Jubilee year for the Queen, and we're going to be promoting the Union and keeping the British end up. So if you'd like to join with us this Saturday, please send an email to contact@aforceforgood.uk. Adam says, boy, do we have a lot to talk about, including what's going on in the great British state of Northern Ireland. Well, why don't we start by talking about that, by talking about the results of the council elections. Now, please send in your comments. What are your thoughts about the results of the council elections, and also the results of the council elections throughout the United Kingdom, and also the assembly elections in Northern Ireland? Send in your comments about that and we'll flash them up on the screen if you've got them. But what I want to talk about straight away is the answers in Scotland, the results in Scotland. They're a mixed bag, basically. It's a mixed bag, but something that we should understand straight away about Scotland is that even at council elections, so many people, they make a judgment, they make a vote based upon what's happening at the British level. Not necessarily what's happening at their council level. Many people don't really keep in touch with who their councillors are or what's happening in the council chambers. Obviously, a lot of people do. These are the people who are very much engaged at the local level. But for a lot of people, and especially a lot of people who vote, they're not really thinking about the council level. You know what? They're not even thinking about the Scottish level. Most people in Scotland, and I know the Scottish nationalists do not like to hear this, but most people in Scotland are politically engaged at the British level. They always have been and they always will be. And that's borne out as well by the turnout vis-a-vis versus the British election and the Holyrood election. And the turnout at British general elections is always so much higher than the turnout at the Holyrood election. And this is because people in Scotland are primarily, and always have been, engaged with what's happening in the wider United Kingdom. Even the Scottish nationalists are more engaged by what's happening in the wider United Kingdom. And so when people are going to vote, they're not, some of us are voting on the potholes and the dirty gutters and the leaves that haven't been collected for 10 years. Some of us are voting on that, but a lot of us are just voting on the basis of what we've seen on the telly regarding Boris Johnson or Keir Starmer having a beer or having a cake without a mask on. You know, many people are just voting on that kind of level. That's just a fact. And this is borne out by two things which I can point out. The very next day after the election, so on the Friday the 6th, the STV, the Scottish Television political editor, he said that he thought people were voting to send a message to Boris Johnson. In fact, his quote was Colin Mackay. He said, people didn't go into the polling booth to send a message to Douglas Ross, who, if you don't know, is the leader of the opposition in Scotland, the Tory leader of the opposition. In fact, the STV political editor said, quote, probably most of them did not know who he was. And he added, they were going to send a message to Boris Johnson. That's the STV political editor saying that people were voting at the Scottish Council elections to send a message to Boris Johnson. And he's probably right. He's probably right there. As I say, because voters in Scotland are much more engaged at what's happening at the British level than what's actually happening outside their front door. In many cases. And here's the final proof that what I'm saying is correct. Nicola Sturgeon herself is quoted here in the Herald on Sunday, on the 8th of May. And she says here, quote, people in any election will vote for a whole variety of reasons. In this election, I think they were voting principally because they want more action on the cost of living crisis and they want to see the Westminster government step up. So it was a strong message on that. So Nicola Sturgeon herself is admitting that people voted at the council elections in order to, quote, voting principally because they want to see the Westminster government step up. That's from Nicola Sturgeon. That's really what happened in Scotland. The Conservatives took a little bit of a dent and Labour did a little better. Now we've got a graphic here which displays the seats won. Let's just look at the seats won. Now, of the seats won, there's the SNP considerably in the lead, and they were up 22 with 453. Labour in second place up 20. But look at the Conservatives, down 62. That's a serious dent. And here in Glasgow, they dropped from 8 councillors to 2 councillors. However, if we add up the SNP seats and the Green seats, that is all the people who are voting for separation and division. If we add them up, we get 488 seats won. If we add up all the Labour, Conservative and Lib Dem votes, these are the parties which are for keeping the UK together, then we get 583. And that's not including the independents and the smaller parties. So certainly the pro-UK parties won considerably more seats than the SNP. Well, what about then the first preference votes? Now, the first preferences are, because in the Scottish elections you can have several votes, 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. The first preference is usually the favourite one. So let's look at the first preference graphic. And there you see the of all the first preference votes, the SNP took 34.1%, Greens took 6%, and Alba took 0.7%. And so if we add all of them up, that's 40.8, let's say 41% of the first preference votes. And if we add up Labour, Conservative and Lib Dem, then we get 49.9, let's say 50% of first preference votes. So you're looking at 50% for the UK first preference votes and 41% against. Now, of course, that doesn't include the independents, small I independents, and the other smaller parties that people were voting for and whose position, constitutional position on for or against the UK is unknown. The Greens taking 6% there of first preference votes, that's surprisingly high, really, and it's a little bit worrying, and I can only put it down to the 24/7 365 propaganda of climate change. The climate change catastrophism which is constantly blared out at young people now from a very early age in school. As you know, my own position is that that's all just a lie, and a nonsensical lie, and it's just really made to encourage us to give money to the government in the expectation that it's going to be able to change the temperature of the world. You know, how absurd. The government can't even keep the streets clean. They can't even clean up the gutters. They're not going to change the temperature of the world and dial it down a few degrees. But nevertheless, so many people will believe the lie, because if you continue to bombard people with the lie, and the climate change lie is everywhere, you cannot get away from it. If you continue to bombard people with that lie, and if you continue to exclude people who say that's a dirty lie, then so many people will, as we've seen in the last 2 years, believe absolute insanity. And so I can only imagine that's where the Greens are getting their vote, because there are some people out there who actually do believe what is clearly a lie. And that's very upsetting. What else was going on out there? There was, as I said, there was a British Unionist Party candidate standing. Now, have I not been telling you for the last 3 weeks that he was going to win? Guess what happened? He won. The BUP man won in the Fortisset ward. So that was good. That was a very good result. And he was one of only 3 small parties that returned a candidate. The others being a party concerned about litter in Ayrshire and a small party in Western Bartonshire. A localist party in Western Bartonshire. If we look at the seats won again, that graphic of the seats won, what we'll find here is that there hasn't really been much of a change. The Conservatives have lost out, and the Labour and the Lib Dems have won their expense. So you see the SNP are just up there 22, Labour are up 22, Tories down 62, and Lib Dem up 20. So it's fair to say the Conservatives have lost out to Labour and the Lib Dems, basically. As Kenny says, the SNP fell far short of an Indie majority, absolutely, certainly by first preference votes. They're 9% behind, and that's the SNP, Greens and Alba added together. They're still 9% behind the pro-UK vote. And Paul, the British Unionist candidate won, which was fantastic. I mean, fantastic result. For getting a wee party like that elected is just incredible. And as Kenny says, it's a bit unfortunate that the SNP won. They won Glasgow by 1 seat. Labour were right behind them. By 1 seat. And it would have been good to have seen the SNP brought low again. Unfortunately, they are going to be able to form a ruling party with their green cabbages. Ross says the Scottish SNP and Greens are going to swindle stealers of free-thinking opinions and much, much worse. Yep, that's very possibly. And Tommy's correct, basically. The SNP haven't made any progress. I think when we look at the result, what we can basically do is we can paraphrase that old saying that over the wires, the electric message came. Scotland is no different. It is much the same. That's basically the takeaway from Thursday's vote. We're kind of stuck, basically. We're very much the same. Ian says, in the longer run, the Conservatives always refused to take the open goal and capitalise on the 1 million Scottish Brexiteers that were always there. That's so true. That's so true as well. And they failed to capitalise also on the 2014 victory. Instead of capitalising upon it with lots of good ideas to take a new United Kingdom forward, all they did was they just basically succumbed to the demands of the SNP and gave the SNP, who was the losing side, gave them all these new powers for them to continue to exploit against the centre and to continue to exploit for division. And that spoke to us very clearly of a complete dearth of political imagination, unfortunately, among many of the politicians who were standing for the union. And in many ways that dearth still remains, and so that's why we continue to promote what we can, such as through our magazine Do More Together, which is a must-read for unionists everywhere, and which gives over 102 policy suggestions on how to keep the United Kingdom together. Briefly, let's also talk about Northern Ireland. Now, the British mass media, the London-based mass media, which is essentially an anti-British enemy within, to be frank with you. All the newspapers really are very much anti-British, and they don't really care about holding the UK together. Maybe one or two do, like the Scottish Daily Express up here takes a very pro-UK unionist position. But basically all the other papers are not like hardcore for the UK. They'll just basically print lies every day on everything. Anyway, that's my little thing aside. Getting back to them, they've been crowing that the end of the union is nigh, because apparently the election in Northern Ireland showed that the Republicans were on the march. Well, not quite really. Very much, again, it's status over there. And let's put up the Northern Ireland results, which we have. Now, this is from Wikipedia, and these are first preference votes for the Assembly people in Stormont. And Sinn Féin topped the poll there with 250,000 votes. But look what the Democratic Unionist Party got, 184,000. Look what the Ulster Unionist Party got, 96,390. And look what Traditional Unionist Voice got, 65,788. And further down there's also the Progressive Unionist Party, which is a much smaller operation, bringing in almost 3,000 votes. So when you add all of those four parties together, the Democratic, the Ulster, the Traditional and the Progressive, you get 348,845, which is considerably more than Sinn Féin got. So what basically happened there is Sinn Féin went into the election with 27 seats and they came out with 27 seats. The Democratic Unionist Party lost 3 seats, as did the Ulster Unionist Party, and that probably what happened was just because of the way that the single transferable vote system works. A lot of second preferences probably went to the Alliance Party of Northern Ireland, which ended up reaping the benefit with 17 seats, which when you think about it is a little bit out of kilter, because look, the Alliance Party of Northern Ireland gets 117,000 votes and gets 17 seats. The Traditional Unionist Voice gets 66,000 votes and 1 seat. So, you see, there's no perfect, even among proportional representation, there's no perfect way of doing it, because the Alliance Party there with 117,000 votes have got way more candidates than the Traditional Unionist, who's only got one seat. What I'm basically saying there is that when you hear Piers Morgan and the others saying the end of the union is nigh, you have to take that with a pinch of salt. The union is still held together, it's still strong, and it's still safe. And so long as we have politicians who will not deliberately risk it, or risk it in a foolish throw of the dice, then it's going to be safe for a very long time. And what we can do as British Unionists is to continue to promote the values and the benefits of solidarity rather than separation, and of unity rather than division. And we do that by doing more together, economically, politically, socially, culturally, and taking each day as it comes, and not succumbing to those who will constantly promote negativity in order deliberately to demoralise us. Now, we've got a guest coming up in a few minutes at the bottom of the hour. Before I do that, it's on this day in British history. On this day in British history. Well, let me just fire up the information about that. Now, it was on this day which is the 11th of May in 1812, that a terrible thing actually happened in British history, and it was the murder of a British sitting Prime Minister. And it's the only, thank goodness, it's the only murder of a British Prime Minister that there's ever been. And it was the murder of Stanley Perceval. Now, Stanley Perceval he had been the Prime Minister for 3 years. He had been elected in, that's a picture of him there, and we'll keep that picture up. He seems like quite a nice chap. He's got a nice face there. Anyway, he was a Tory. He was a Tory, and he was of Anglo-Irish descent and an evangelical Anglican. As I say, he'd been the PM since October 1809, and he was shot in the chest in the lobby of the House of Commons by a fellow called John Bellingham, who was a merchant who had worked in Russia in the import-export trade, and who had been imprisoned there for I don't know what, but he had returned to Britain, and he had an obsessive grievance against the government, claiming that his petitions to the government for compensation had been rejected. And after the shooting, Bellingham, the criminal, he sat down, he was arrested, and as happened in those days, he was hung from a rope 7 days later. Okay, so that was the murder of Stanley Perceval on this day, the only murder of a sitting British Prime Minister, or of a British Prime Minister ever. And poor old Perceval there, he was 49 years old, and whatever he did, this Bellingham chap blamed the Prime Minister for it. And it wasn't until July 2014, actually, that a plaque was erected in the House of Commons in the lobby there to commemorate the foul deed and to remember poor old Mr. Perceval. So that was on this day. Now, our guest has entered the studio, I'm glad to say, and looking forward to interviewing our guest. Now, our guest is Thomas Mace Archer-Mills, who is the chairman of the British Monarchist Society, and who is a royal correspondent and a historian, and also something of a musician. Now, I'm so excited about our fantastic guest here. It's Thomas. Thomas, hello. How are you doing this evening?
Absolutely fantastic. I've been watching the show from the green room.
Just for the sake of introduction, tell the viewers what the BMS is, and how did that start, and what is it that it does?
Well, Alistair, it's funny, that's a loaded question, because the BMS was never supposed to be what it is. It was really, in 2009, a grouping of like-minded individuals on Facebook that wanted to educate about the Crown, about the Union, and everything that comes with Her Majesty's position as a constitutional aspect. And we grew to the point where I said, well, if we want to really be effective, we need to come off of an online platform. We actually need to work in society if we want to change it for the better. So we actually incorporated properly on paper during 2012 the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. So we're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year. So with that, what we do is we focus on education. We're not a fan club. We're not, oh, we love what Kate wore, and oh, did you see what the First Minister did? She didn't curtsy properly at the tea party at Holyrood. We don't do that sort of thing. We look at the constitutional aspect of Her Majesty and successors within government in actual relation to her place, not only in England and Wales, but also Northern Ireland and Scotland, because we can't forget that she is the Queen of Scotland as well, and the Union plays a very big part in what we do. So for us to educate about the British Crown, that also includes the Act of Union under Queen Anne. So it's so important that we understand how the Union came to be, because without it, we wouldn't have the British monarchy, really. So that's what we do. We are an educational-based organisation, Alistair.
Fantastic. Well, that's absolutely right up our street, because we're the same as far as those things go. It's all about educating people about it. And, this is the United Kingdom. It's not the United Republic. And some of our unionist people, and I understand where they're coming from, they go, oh, you can still have, the monarchy is not intrinsic to the union, etc., etc. But really today, it absolutely is intrinsic to the union. And this, who realises that the most? The Scottish nationalists realise it the most. Yes. And if they were to ever get their way, they would try to move society in such a way that they would try to get a referendum to try to chuck out the Scottish monarchy, and so on and so forth. And historically, they're totally in the wrong, because Scotland's always been a monarchy. As we always say, during the period of the interregnum, after Charles I was cruelly murdered, basically within a week, the Scots declared his son to be King of Great Britain. Not King of Scotland, King of Great Britain. So I always say, Britain's always had a monarchy, albeit, disputed during that particular period. And so the Scots have always been monarchists. And of course, all that whole conflict during what we call the British Civil War was based upon, it wasn't against the crown as such. Even the Covenanters were monarchists. And it was just that the king wasn't, for them, religious enough, basically. There was never any conflict that we shouldn't have a monarchy. I mean, the monarchy was always just considered to be an absolute certainty, whether you were an official Scottish royalist or a Scottish Covenanter. Like, the fact of the monarchy was central to it. So that's such an important thing to educate about as well.
It is, and this is the thing, because being born in the United States, I've now lived most of my life outside of America than I did inside, but I was born under a republic. And I know the trappings of politics. I know that in such as the case of the United States of America, the government doesn't answer to anyone. There isn't one pinnacle factoring person who is above politics like the United Kingdom, whereas Her Majesty sits above all of that and says, look, I am here as Queen of the people, not Queen of a party, not King of a party, the people. And the government of the day actually answers to me. So there's something higher, there's something above politics. And coming from the United States and continuing to watch what happens in that republic, Alistair, it makes me so sad when separatists want to say, right, we're going to have our independence and then we're going to have a plebiscite on getting rid of the monarchy and we can have, President Sturgeon. And I'm like, oh, that's a very dangerous road, because you're not coming up with something that is better. And if you really think that usurping the power of the crown by a politician is going to be better than actually making the government of the day answerable to someone, one being, you're sadly mistaken, because that's what we have everywhere else in the world. We have politicians' playgrounds. And what we have in the United Kingdom and the 15 other realms and a very small handful of other countries in the world with constitutional monarchy, it's sort of an exclusive club, if you will, but one that works for the people. And it shouldn't, the crown shouldn't be known for the power it has. It should be known for the power it denies others, such as overzealous politicians who wish to usurp that power for themselves and their party, which will always push unity to the brink. Because once politics are involved, as you know, it divides us, whereas the monarchy and the crown under Her Majesty unites us.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I agree. And something I like about it, and maybe you know more about this, but it used to be, and I hope it still is, the case that the PM has to have a weekly audience with the crown. Is that still something that happens?
It is. They became a little more infrequent under Mr. Blair. He was just very busy, I guess. But the current Prime Minister, he still meets with Her Majesty. They used to be on Tuesdays. They have been moved around a little bit depending on what's happened. I think this past week, it's today. Today's Wednesday. So the meeting is happening with the Prime Minister and Her Majesty today. But all successive Prime Ministers have always had weekly audiences with Her Majesty. It's just the way it is because of her duty to the country. She has the right to advise, the right to counsel, the right to warn, and that's what she does.
That's right, and it's a weekly reminder to whoever is the Prime Minister that they're not actually top of the tree. They're not actually, they've got to answer to somebody, even if that person politically doesn't have, the strong political power over them. Nevertheless, it's a reminder that they're not the only dog in this game. They're not the only person in the game. So it keeps them, it keeps the head on their shoulders, as it were.
It does,
which I think is good.
Well, that title, Prime Minister, because there's so many other ministers in the cabinet, but he's the head minister, since the name Prime Minister. But at the end of the day, he is the first minister of which he sits in Her Majesty's government. He's not the Prime Minister until the Queen invites him to form a government in her name. So this is what a lot of people don't understand, is that she's not just a figurehead, and she has real power according to our Constitution. And it's very interesting when you look at her right now, because if I was her, I would have called up the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition and said, right, you two, get it together, because the example that you're doing, the tit for tat's not working for me, it's not working for the government, sort yourselves. But she has the power to do that. And we can't forget, Alistair, that just because we haven't seen Her Majesty use any of her real powers over the last 70 years, doesn't mean that they're not there to be used. And this is a danger with our lovely, fantastic Queen, is that she's not had the need to actually exercise those powers. So some people will argue, well, now there's a precedent set that a monarch cannot and should not use those powers, when in fact that's a very dangerous slippery slope, because those powers truly are there for the monarch, regardless whether they exercise them or not. So that's where I think the rise of, Her Majesty's just a figurehead comes from. And that statement cannot be furthest from the truth.
Yes, good points. Good points. Now, were you down at Parliament yesterday when it was the state opening of Parliament? What was going on there? Do you have any thoughts on what you were doing yesterday?
Well, we made history yesterday, and I was there covering it for a few different international networks. And I heard so many people, other pundits and just other people say, oh, the Queen is not here and it's such a sad day. And I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, she's not here, but we can't forget, this is a 96-year-old woman in full-time employment. So, absolutely. And her mobility is questioned. So there are limitations. And okay, being British, we understand and we say, right, with your life comes fantastic privilege and wealth, and we understand how that is, but you will work until your last day, and she is going to make good on that contract that she did. But what we had yesterday was very special. It was the first time Prince Charles has actually stepped in as a de facto monarch. Okay, it's not a regency, there's nothing going on there, but we had a glimpse into the future of this country. We had a glimpse into what the monarchy is going to be when Her Majesty is no longer with us. And of course, it's sad. She's always been there. She's the only sovereign you've known, I've known, probably most of your viewers have ever known. But we have to be realist royalists here, Alistair, and say, you know what, eventually the sun does set, but that doesn't mean it doesn't come up another day on something that could be even better. So what we saw... Right. Oh, I'm so sorry. But what we saw yesterday was a very big piece of history. And I think the people of Wales were watching very keenly to see, well, wait a minute, this is the Prince of Wales who is now actually bearing the torch. That title of Prince of Wales for the people of that country, I think, have something very, very interesting to be proud of, because they are directly involved in what happened yesterday, as we all are. Now, imagine if the prince had used his Scottish title when he had gone into Parliament yesterday. So you have the Duke of Rothesay saying the Queen's speech on her behalf and all of this. Now, if they would have referred to him, the BBC here in London, when we watched, if they would have referred to him by his Scottish title, I think Scots people really would have had their ears perk up as well and say, hey, that's our Duke, that's our Prince as well. We're making history today. And I think just using one title south of the border as the Prince of Wales, because we don't really call him the Duke of Cornwall here, but I think for people north of the border who know him as the Duke, I think if we looked at a different title down here versus where you are, it would have a very different meaning to people north of the border to see him referred to on national television as his Scottish title.
I absolutely agree, and in fact, I did hear the SNP fellow Ian Blackford, the leader of the SNP, he did actually refer to Prince Charles as the Duke of Rosslyn, which I thought, which I was quite touched by. I thought it was quite nice that he's doing that, and again, that would prick up people's ears, because it certainly pricked up my ears. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll tell you a little fun bit, Alistair, because I was on Sky News, literally just following him. What was it, a fortnight ago, on the Queen's birthday, the 21st, and the presenter was so funny, because she said, right, now, Mr. Blackford, thank you as always, and now we're going to, Thomas, oh, and she went back to him and said, now, Mr. Blackford, I'm sure you, of all people, would like to wish Her Majesty a very happy 96th birthday. And he was so gracious with it. Of course, I'd like to wish her a happy birthday. And he's a very good sport. I know his leanings, and I know how he feels about the monarchy, but I do have to say that even though politically I don't agree with him, he's always shown respect to the head of state and her heirs and successors. And I do give a lot of credit for that. So it was just a funny little quip, because I was practically in stitches before going on live, trying to contain myself. And I'm like, did she really just do that to him?
Good. Oh, well, I'm glad to hear it. But I thought that Prince Charles was looking quite regal, actually, with his... whatever uniform that was that he was wearing. It certainly, as you say, it gave us a glimpse into the future. And certainly that's something to be grateful for. As you mentioned, like, the great thing about monarchy is it doesn't end. It just keeps going on. And I think when Her Majesty's father died, the media had said, the king dies but Britain lives on. And a new hand takes the wheel of state, which I thought that's really good and
well, that's
gratifying.
What we saw yesterday, Alistair. We saw the Queen very much still alive, with the crown placed where it was, and we saw Prince Charles look and observe that crown. But when we saw him walk in, behind him in that fantastic photograph of him with the Duchess of Cornwall, the Duchess of Rothesay, and then Prince William behind them. Again, that picture is so integral to the continuity of the British crown, because it shows the line, it shows what's coming, it shows the hereditary aspect. So we didn't just get a glimpse of who is coming to the throne. We saw continuity, and those are the very aspects of what keeps this union together, is something there as an anchor that shows us in perpetual continuity, and it's so important.
Perpetual continuity, that's absolutely right. Now, you do many things with the British Monarchist Society, and one of the things that you've done, and this is very interesting and very praiseworthy, is you have put together a couple of pieces of music. Now, we'll give people the where to acquire it, but first, can you just tell us what this is all about, and what is it that you've done here?
This is, I always want to educate. And the way I thought we could do that and set ourselves apart when I found out that the BBC wasn't doing an anthem this year, such as they did in 2012 with Gary Barlow, I said, let's jump on that. So literally a year and a half ago, I said, right, let me get people together. We're going to write an anthem. But I have a dilemma, Alistair. How do I put 70 years of a reign in 96 years of a life into 4.5 minutes of song? So if I'm going to do an anthem that needs to have all the pomp and pageantry and circumnavigate the world of where Her Majesty has touched and set foot in actually as Queen to 15 countries, but also go internally, how do I represent Scotland and Wales, Northern Ireland and England? How do I represent this kingdom? So I said, right, if Taylor Swift can put out an 11.5-minute song, why can't I? But we didn't make it continuous. We broke it down. So I literally went to some of our patrons, Dr. Olga Thomas, who is the resident composer at Crew's Bereavement Care, of which Her Majesty is patron. But also she's the private composer to Her Majesty and the royal family. And she's a friend of mine and also a patron of the BMS. And I said, Dr. Thomas, I said, I want to do this. help me. And she goes, right. And she has a fantastic ability to just hear things in her mind and create it. So she would phone me at 1 and 2 in the morning and say, I've had a thought, and here I am, literally head on my pillow, bang, bang, bang on the keyboard. And I'm like, that sounds great. Sounds great. And then I would think about it and I'd let it set in, and I'd phone her back 20 minutes later. I say, right, so that's symbolic of a slow march. If we look at the Scots Guard, I can see them coming down the mall to this and all of that. And I said, right, but you want to deal with just instrumental. I want to hark back to the coronation. I want exaltations. I want Vivat Regina, all of these things. So I said, right, let me go to Leslie Garrett, CBE, who is the UK's most well-known soprano. She had her own BBC show for years. And I said, right, let me talk to some other people, and let's go after Rodney Earl Clarke, who is starring right now in Les Mis on the West End. And he was the first black British opera singer to actually sing God Save the Queen, the national anthem at Twickenham. Fantastic. Right. And then I said, how do we make this even better? Well, let's go to the London Community Gospel Choir, who is just absolutely renowned internationally all over the world, and they're currently performing on Britain's Got Talent. So we all went to the studio with this piece, and what came out, just the power of this song. It's Elgar-esque. It brings you right back to the coronation, but in a modern way. And you can see all of the vistas of the palace, the abbey, the guards, everything. And that's what we wanted. Fantastic. But then I said, we need to do something else, because we are circumnavigating the United Kingdom, but we can't leave out the realms. We can't leave out the 54 nations of the Commonwealth. We've got to do something. So I said to one of my really good friends, who is a well-known opera singer and producer in South Africa, who was living here at the time. This was all during lockdown, mind you. So our Zoom calls were just hours and hours and hours. And thank God Zoom had suspended that 40-minute time frame that we had. And Anton Vandermeer, just a fantastic talent. I sat with him for days and days, literally tens of man hours, going through all the notes. How do I do 70 years of this reign? How do I do 96 years of life? I want to take the imagery. I want to show the Queen's unblemished face, her maturing face. I want to talk about duty. I want to talk about everything that she has done. And we talk about the Union. And we feature Scotland. And it's so important because we all know she's woke every day by a bagpiper. What is more iconic than bagpipes? So, of course, we have bagpipes that introduce the Scotland section. We've got the Irish flute for Northern Ireland, you know, all of these things. But this is a circumnavigation musically around the world, and it touches everyone who is a subject of Her Majesty. But I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's not people who are just a subject of Her Majesty. She is the world's queen, Alistair. There's other queen regnants, but when you say the queen to anyone in the world,
absolutely,
they can point to Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom and say the queen. Yes. They all know who we're talking about. So what we created were two fantastic tracks that are going to rival anything that we've put out. And when you look at when we debuted on the Queen's birthday, at number 1 and number 2 on the iTunes classical chart, and number 27 on the iTunes top 100, it was just fantastic. We had actually, in fine style, on the eve of Her Majesty's birthday, had a live performance of this with Leslie and Rodney at the Rubens Hotel, and we had all of our MPs and lords there. Baroness Hooper was there. We had some other members, private members of the royal family were there, members of the royal household, high commissioners of Her Majesty's realms. And Alistair, giving this gift to Her Majesty, it's not just for the Jubilee, it is a thank you. And that second song is called Your Majesty, We Thank You from Our Hearts. And this is heartfelt. It is the thought and everything that's gone into the verses to say, this isn't just for your Jubilee. This is celebrating you as 70 years of Queen of this nation. And God forbid, when she is no longer with us, this song will still be just as prevalent because it's a reflection on her life.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I've listened to both pieces of music, and I can certainly recommend them as very stirring. And there you are. Hold up that CD again. And while you're holding it up, I'll just say you can download that from iTunes, or you can purchase the CD, or you can purchase a luxury edition of the CD, which I believe is signed by Leslie Garrett and so on.
It's signed by all the artists.
Yes, good. And you can do that at the Jubilee Anthem 2022.com. That's the Jubilee Anthem 2022.com. It has links to the iTunes, to other streaming platforms, and to buy that CD, or to buy the signed copies of the CD.
There's two CDs. There's the luxury limited edition, which is all signed, and then you have just the unlimited print run, which is the one I had held up.
Right.
There aren't many left of the limited edition, but
Right.
if they get the limited edition, the Queen got number 1, Prince Charles got one, and the Duchess of Cornwall got one as well.
Quite right,
so
quite right.
Yeah, there was only 67 by the time we were done giving them to the principal people in the crown. So yes,
great, well done, Thomas.
Thank you.
We've come to the conclusion of this interview. There, I just want to say well done for all that work that you've put in, especially for that music, but also for the educational work that the British Monarchist Society does. And here on your website is the monarchists.com. And you're also on Facebook and also on Twitter at The Monarchists.
And Instagram.
And Instagram as well.
And Instagram.
And under The Monarchists.
Yes.
So that's a really good organisation that's dedicated to promoting the British monarchy, not only here in the United Kingdom, but also worldwide. So we must have you on again, Thomas.
I'd love to come back. This is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good, and you've got a good setup there, and
Thank you.
It's absolutely perfect broadcasting tonight for us. Sorry about the wee hitch there at the start. That was my bad. So I'll say good night.
I repel technology, so it was probably my fault.
Yeah, I know. I think we all do, but we have to sort of deal with it. Okay, well, I'll say good night to you, and
Lovely.
God bless, and God save the Queen.
You as well, Alistair. Thank you very much, and strong to the Union.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Fantastic. Thomas Mace Archer Mills of the British Monarchist Society. So glad to have Thomas on. He's a real trooper and a real knight in shining armour for Her Majesty the Queen. Paul says, removing a monarchy can open the door to political extremism. The Spanish felt the need to restore their monarchy in 1978, and the British felt the need to restore it as well back in 1660, when everything fell apart in Parliament and none of the factions could agree with each other. They got Charles II back in again. So it does show that we've been here and we've done it, and the monarchy is definitely the best way, and it is what makes Britain distinct and unique. And that's why a lot of people are opposed to it, because they know its power in the United Kingdom as part of our identity. Now, folks, we're going to be out again this Saturday. We've got Activism planned. Now, I can't give too much away at the moment, but if you'd like to stand with us, it will be in Glasgow. Please contact us. Contact at aforceforgood.uk, because we do need a few people to stand with us. So if you're in the Glasgow area and you're interested, you'd like to come out with us, drop us a message, and if we know who you are, we'll give you all the info that you need. But we do need help this Saturday, so if you can help us on the streets, it's contact at aforceforgood.uk. We've got a busy summer of activism ahead of us, and in June we're going to be out every weekend, and we've also got a magazine that we're putting together. And that's what the final thing that I wanted to say is, we're not going to be broadcasting next Wednesday, and the reason for that is because I have to take 10 days out to write issue 6 of Union Heart, which will be a 12-page special Platinum Jubilee edition, where we are going to do what Thomas said there, and we're going to educate about the monarchy and Scotland, and we're going to print this in sufficient bulk that we're going to be giving it away free at our street stalls, and we'll have that ready for the Jubilee weekend, which is the 4th of June. So that's a big thing. So we do need to get some cash in via merchandise, via our union supporters program, and via simply one-off donations. And we'll put that link there. If you'd like just to help us, please do just send a donation to contact@aforceforgood.uk/donate to. If you'd just like to fire us a donation to help us with our activism. And as I say, we are intending to be out on Saturday as well, if we can get the folk to join us. So it's just a little past the hour. I'm going to say good night, folks. We won't be here next Wednesday, but we'll be here the week after our issue 6 gets to the press. So it just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the Queen. We'll see you next time.